Hello! I'm making this video in response to Hemanth Valuru. Thank you for posting. And he's asked a question which I think reveals something about the misconception that students and teachers have about English literature. So what he's asked is, will the two questions on the 19th century novel and the Shakespeare play be on either character or themes or setting? And is there anything else that I should cover? Well, I'm going to use Romeo and Juliet to show you why that is the wrong question. And the real question is this: what is the author's purpose? And that will hit everything else. So I prepare my students to always write about the author's purpose. In this way, you automatically cover all three of character, themes, and settings. For example, if a purpose of Romeo and Juliet is to warn parents and teenagers of upper class families of the dangers of marrying for love rather than proper parental arrangement, then these things will follow. So let's look at setting first. If Shakespeare is trying to say that arranged marriages are best, parents know best, then setting it in Verona helps emphasize that marrying for love is a dangerous foreign concept. Yeah, this is an Italian thing. And it's also tinged with associations to the Catholic setting. So what you must remember is that England had been Catholic until the time of King Henry VIII, who was Elizabeth I's father. So just a generation before Shakespeare's audience. And there's great suspicion of Catholics in England. They're really despised figures, and therefore there's a merit in setting it in Verona, because this dangerous idea of these two lovers deciding to marry for love instead of by arrangement from their parents is obviously a foreign and dangerous idea. And that's in contrast to Protestant England. So that's one way of talking about Shakespeare's purpose and linking it to the setting. Well, you can easily link this to the theme of tragedy. In this case, love, which is equated with impulse. The two characters, Romeo and Juliet, act entirely on their emotional impulses. They don't act with thought and planning and an awareness of consequence. So the lovers take no time but rush headlong into their tragedy. The friar preaches caution. They stumble that run too fast, he says, but then he marries them immediately anyway. And so we can see that this is his impulse. So, that's what Shakespeare's warning against. Love, he's saying, is just like an impulse. It's not something that you give into if you step back and think about it sensibly. You'd be much better off listening to your parents who know exactly what's best for you, and society will run better that way. This is how the rich hold on to their power and indeed increase it, because they create alliances with other rich families. And so that could be his purpose in writing the play. Right, well, the other part of the question was, do I have to discuss character? Well, again, looking at Shakespeare's purpose will immediately give you an insight into character. So Romeo's character is ridiculed through his original love for Rosaline. So in terms of the structure of the play, that's why Shakespeare introduces this love story with Rosaline, only in order to show how ridiculous it is that Romeo falls in love straight away with Juliet. And it also shows his immaturity, because he's trying to pay Rosaline with gifts to have sex with him. So there's the quotation, won't ope her lap to saint seducing gold. Juliet's speech, the next character we can look at, what's in a name, is the root of the tragedy, because Shakespeare's saying the family name is everything. Romeo is a Montague, and that should be a warning of impending tragedy to Juliet, but she ignores it, because what she's doing is completely ignoring her parents' wishes, just as Romeo is. He's choosing to fall in love with his family's enemy. So the family name is everything, and if they both decided that that was what was important in life, the tragedy would never have happened. So that again is Shakespeare's message, his purpose. And so what he's suggesting is that the best matches are made by parents, by families who are looking after each other's interests. But the wonderful thing about studying English literature is that you don't have to believe that at all. You can argue the exact reverse, that Shakespeare is actually promoting marriage through love rather than arrangement. Um, Now, the key here is not that I get the right author's purpose. The key is that I have an author's purpose that makes sense to me when I study the play. So here's my reverse argument. He is forced to sit in Verona. That was gibberish, wasn't it? Let's start again. He is forced to set it in Verona because his audience already know the stories. This is another way to use the context here. It's a story that's already popular in England, which is why his prologue tells the story of the whole play. We find out right at the beginning that this is going to be a tragedy in which the lovers kill themselves. And Shakespeare does that because all the audience already know that before they buy their tickets. They're coming to see a story they're already familiar with. So now I have to argue that the tragedy is caused by um, the system that allows families to dictate the lives of their children. So Romeo's infatuation with Rosaline now isn't to ridicule his immaturity. It's a product of the overemphasis on family in the class system, as is his love of Juliet. There would be no need for him to seek sexual experience outside marriage if the society were not so patriarchal, in other words, controlled by men for men, and if he did not have to wait for a suitable match to be found by his feuding family. Um, so the tragedy is caused by the fact that he can't choose his own partner, and he has to do things surreptitiously behind his family's back. And that's produced by this system where he's not free to choose. It's also an attack on the feud, this closed mentality that reduces everything to the clan. And I'm looking at the families as extended families here, as you can see in the battle in Verona between the Capulets and the Montague. And that's the very thing that Shakespeare has escaped by leaving Stratford for London. So my contextual evidence here is that Shakespeare has rejected that way of life, and he's rebelled against that sort of upbringing and chosen his own way of living. And you could also argue that his marriage is also a rejection of the arranged marriage. He marries at 18 a woman of 28. Um, not necessarily, although we're not sure, but not necessarily with his parents' wishes. He chooses his own route, and therefore he has his characters do the same thing. Okay, well, it will also help us look at character differently. So we go back to Juliet's question, what's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet, which then becomes the motto of the play. Shakespeare is trying to show that the world is better as a meritocracy, a place where everyone earns their own place through merit. So where people rise in love or marriage and power according to their abilities, not their inherited worth or what they've inherited from their family. Again, this reflects how Shakespeare himself is a self-made man. He's a theatrical entrepreneur. He runs theatres and partly owns them. He writes plays and creates a new dramatic form through his plays. So he's doing something devastatingly new at the time that is right at the forefront of popular entertainment. Absolutely fantastic stuff for his day. And that's what Juliet's question means. My destiny isn't my upbringing. My destiny isn't the family that I come from. I can make of myself who I want. And that's exactly what the lovers try to do. And it's society that stops them. And if society were different, they could succeed. And Shakespeare's talking about transforming society. He's moved to London to do it, but he's building a new society that didn't exist before. Before Shakespeare's time, going to the theatre was about going to see religious plays that enforced stories from the Bible or moral stories. And Shakespeare and his contemporaries come along and rip all that up and treat it purely as entertainment and spectacle. And that's completely new. It's difficult for us now to imagine what that was like. It's a bit like going back 20 years and imagining a world without the internet. It's really hard for you to do that. But imagine that you were the person who invented the internet and had made it all work. That's what we're looking at with Shakespeare. So I hope what I've shown you is that the key to success is on deciding what you think the author's purpose is. And I've used Romeo and Juliet just to show you that. You don't have to get the correct author's purpose. It's one that you can back up, that feels true to you. And as long as you've got the textual evidence and evidence from context, you will get that question right every time. And the other benefit of that is it will allow you to revise everything really quickly, because you don't separately go off and learn about character and separately go off and learn about context. It all fits together from your understanding of the author's point of view. So I hope you found that really helpful. Apply it to the texts that you're studying, and don't forget to subscribe for more.